and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, thanks for giving me a chance. This is the Varietal Literature YouTube channel. It's a cozy corner of the internet for narrative and people who love stories. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to play a little tabletop RPG that's about wandering around. It's a bit more interesting than that, but then we're going to use that as prompts to write. And I think the premise that I'm going to base it on is trying to get gifts to somebody before a snowstorm sweeps away our path, probably in a sort of medieval, maybe a little more modern than that, but that kind of pre-car era. Just because I think it'll be more interesting. And yeah, so we're going to play a game called Threep, and then we're going to add our own layer of sort of Christmassy stuff on it. Or at least, if you're not a Christmassy person, midwinter. And yeah, if you're here live, check out the live chat. We have GS Gemstore and Uncle Kitty in there. Hey folks, good to see you. And I'm sure we have a few lurking, as we often do. Sorry. And yeah, if you're not watching this live, though, you can go down to the description below and click on any of the timestamps, and it will jump you to whatever part most interests you. Relatable story premise, indeed. Okay. If you mean, did we get snow? Some areas here got snow, but unfortunately, Vancouver isn't a very snowy place. It's a lot of rain all the time. It's actually technically a rainforest, and it shows. Okie doke. Let me get into the game. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you want to know what we're doing. This part of the show is called litgames. It stands for literature games, and that's my catch-all term for a whole variety of solo tabletop RPGs, writing games, journaling games, things like that. And the one that we're playing tonight is called Threep. I should have checked how to pronounce that, because I might be mispronouncing it. It's apparently a Scottish word. Go. Center that a little more. Threep. It's called an amble through the borderlines. And I'm going to give you a brief description of how it works. And then after that, we're going to pull some prompts, do some writing. You guys can make recommendations about what we find. And when we feel like we've sort of seen what the game has to offer, we'll call it a night. All right. So Threep requires you to have a deck of cards. I have my deck of lovely little Kirby cards, as I usually do. From there, it has these, yeah, okay. I'll just show you it here, but it has its own little card for tracking this as well. The way it works is you draw a card, and based on the values on the card, you get different weather. Based on that value of a second card, you get different sort of things you find on your walk. So, for example, we draw one weather card. Let's just sort of draw one and see what happens. It's a 6 of diamonds. Fun little Kirby on it. 6 of diamonds. Diamonds means we move up on temperature and down on precipitation. So, precipitation is here. You start at the top, and then move down on precipitation means fog, mist, clears, mid-morning if red card. So that just tells us when it clears, and so on and so forth. The one thing I am going to change for this game to make it a little more Christmassy is when we get, it's based around Scotland, and so it's pretty much just rain and mist, but we're going to push a little further north to the more frozen areas of like Norway for this setting, so drizzle will become snow. That's what I'm going to say now. Okay, And down, move up on temperature. So temperature is here. You start in the center, but you don't move up from the center ever if it's winter. You can't see that, but right off to the side there is, it says not in winter. And then the top two are summer only. So what we would do is just not change the temperature. But if this said to move down, then it would become chilly. If it moved down again, it'd be cold, bitter, and freezing. And the bottom two are in winter only. Okay, and then the symbol, I guess? Suit. Boy, it took me a minute there. The suit tells us the wind direction, which would be west in this case. And so from there, we get our weather and our setting. We draw one more card. In this case, it is a 10 of hearts. Several fun little Kirby's on it. And it will give us a location type, what we find along our walk. So hearts puts us in this row here. Oh, let me select just that row. This row here. Jumpstore says cold, bitter, and freezing. Gam Gam, is that you? And then down at 10, it says moorland or moorland. So it means that we would, putting those two things together, we would be in a place that was cold, but not particularly like bitterly cold at the moment. The mist cleared, the wind's blowing in from the west, and we're walking across a moorland. And then it gives us some prompts for, you know, what kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? What kind of thing we just discovered. So that is a scrub. The types are along the side here. That's a scrub. And for scrub, it says poor land draws things from the margins. What is here? We don't have to use the prompts, but that's there to sort of help your ideas. Okay, from there, there's a couple of optional things I don't think I'm going to engage too much with right now, but one option is you leave your jokers in the deck, and when you draw a joker, you reset your weather and precipitation tracks, so they can go down and up and whatever else, but you go back to neutral, whatever that is. And if you draw a joker card for the location card, then it's like a little village or a hamlet you find. And then there's an optional rule too, where if you're unsure how difficult a journey between the locations were, you can draw a card, or you can use the suit on the drawn card to define whether it was a particularly tiring journey or whatever else. So that's the gist of it. For my money, what I'm going to do here says Tammy, her mother, is not doing well after her surgery. I know she had surgery on her shoulder. I'm sorry to hear she's not doing well. She's trying to make up for lost sleep. Well, I hope she feels better. Obviously, that's the most important thing. Thank you for the update. Okay, I'm going to shuffle these cards in. And then we'll get playing. All right, first thing we have to do to start this story is, forgot to give this a title. Need to give our character. Kara says she was supposed to be prescribed pain meds, but her insurance, thanks to American healthcare, didn't want her to have any opioids, so they gave her hydro. Now they're taking their sweet time actually giving her prescription to her doctor. Do your insurance companies really have that much say over your life? Like they can override doctor decisions? That's nuts. It's hard for me to understand that, to be honest. I'm a little baffled. You're an insurance company. Who cares what you think about the right thing to do? Where the hell is center on this thing? Whatever. Uncle Kitty says, yes, Rory. Man, I'd riot. That's insane. Lizzie Rose says health insurance. Also, hello, Lizzie. Says health insurance in the US sucks ass. Makes no sense. Apparently, that is offensively stupid to me. Okay. Like, I guess I can understand, like, even Canadian health insurance, you know, there are limits on what they'll cover, and some of it is a bit silly, but they either cover a thing or they don't. They never go like, oh, we won't pay for this. You have to get this. Like, override a doctor's decision. That's insane to me. Good God. Okay. Well, I have much more to say, but I don't think that's what anybody's here to hear me talk about. So I'm going to move on. But my sympathies for you. Well, that is incredible overreach, Lizzie. I don't understand why anyone's allowing that to happen. Okay. We need a character name. Luckily, Threep has this little extra thing, which allows you to use card drawing to get first and last names. So we're going to do that. This is a 5 of clubs. The 5 of clubs is Godwin. Godwin's a solid name. And then the last name is an Ace of Hearts. A cute Kirby. Forgot to show the last Kirby. Still haven't shown the last Kirby. Kirby says, that's an insane healthcare system. Okay. Ace of Hearts is good. Good? Godwin good? No. No. Nope, that's not going to work. Let's pull another one. King of Spades. Forrester. Godwin Forrester is better. Hera says, I'd rather not get into politics on my escapism stream. Yeah, fair enough. That was sort of why I was moving on. I wish I could, Lizzie. But yeah. You have my sympathies, and I will leave it at that. Godwin was Mary Shelley's maiden name. Oh, I didn't know that. Mary Godwin. I gotta be honest, I kind of like Mary Shelley more, but maybe that's just because I heard it first. Godwin Forrester maybe doesn't quite fit with my idea of a sort of Nordic fellow, but whatever. Okay. So my symbol premise here, my broad structural premise, is we are in a time where it takes some, like at least a day's hike to get to the next town. And if you have horses, you're probably pretty wealthy, so you mostly have to do it on foot. I don't know how long it'll take him to get to his destination, kind of the speed of what should we do stuff in this stream and when I want to wrap the story. But I wanted to have it that he has to sort of he wants to get a gift by, I don't know, I guess like Christmas or something. It doesn't have to be Christmas. It could just be any of the midwinter holidays. If we're going north, I mean, just anything. It could be the 12 feasting days and around the solstice or whatever. But anyways, he wants to get there. If we get up to Hero says Odin win Oakenster. Does that sound more Nordic? I think so, yeah. But the thought I had in my back of my head is if we get all the way down to Thunder and Storm, well, I don't know, we could reference the Wild Hunt, right? But I don't know if we'll get that far down because it's like, how many steps down do you have to go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 8 and 9 is what we'd have to reach. I don't think we're going to get through that much, but we'll see what happens. Okay, Godwin Forrester. So here's the question for chat. And if you've got no ideas, that's fine. I'll come up with something. What is the gift? Who are we delivering it to? Why is it so important to us to get it there now? I have some ideas, but I always like to open it up to the chat first. And while I do that, we'll reference our long-running but inconsistent section. What tea are you drinking? Jumpstore says, I love Wild Hunt stories. Yeah, we'll see if we get to that. I love the Wild Hunt too, but I think I've mentioned before that Frau Gauden, my favorite version of the Wild Hunt, she's a character in my D&D universe who shows up at Christmas and gives people things. Gives people things if they do great feats of hunting. Otherwise, she punishes you. Uncle Kitty says, family heirloom you're delivering to a surviving relative. Ooh, I like that idea. You're going the other way with it. Double-bladed battle axe delivering to a dwarf because we kind of sort of borrowed it without permission. I think both those ideas play well together. We could make both those work. These are inventive ideas. Sorry, I'm thinking. The axe obviously needs to be the family heirloom. Jumpstore says stuffed animal delivering to niece because we promised her on her birthday after messing up the original gift. How did we mess up the original gift, Jumpstore? Like halfway to an idea. I think what underlies all of those, though, is that we feel guilty. So whether we feel guilty because we swiped something, maybe we were, you know, an old soldier who battled, stole from a dwarf family or something and has been haunted by it and wants to return it, or whatever else. Whatever it is, guilt underlies it, so we'll leave it a little more implied for now. Jumpstore said apparently little girls aren't as excited to receive the severed head of your most recent fallen enemy? Now, I don't know. I had a sister growing up who I think might have. Because there's goths, like, you know, makeup goths listening to Nine Inch Nails or whatever would be the modern reference. That doesn't make me seem old. But then there's also goths, or, you know, an old warring historical culture. Okay. Is that dark, Jump Store? I don't know. Like, there's some people I'd like to behead these days. All right. Oh, we gotta draw cards. What am I doing? I was like, I wonder what the weather's like. And then it's like, that's the game, Rory. Draw the card. Okay, that card is blank. It's not even a Joker card. I don't know what this card was ever meant to be, but not in this pack. Five of Hearts with a Kirby in a frog costume holding a ghost. I know this frog. What is he from? Is he just a Kirby character, or is he from something else? Jump Store says you can blame it all on B horror movies. Indeed. I do contest that a lot of B horror movies are fundamentally comedies. Okay, so it's Hearts. Move down on the temperature and up on the precipitation. Oh. Well, where you can't move up on the precipitation. Yeah, we can't, so I guess there's just no weather. And then move down on the temperature, so it is chilly. Okay. And the wind is blowing in from the east. I should make a note of this. Chilly, easterly wind. And the wind speed is a 5. Moderate breeze. There we go. Did I mention wind speed? I think I didn't. Uncle Kitty says, ah, crap, it's snowing. I know the case against it, but I do like snow. I've yet to not. Even when I'm spinning my wheels bald in it, I still like snow. Okay. We'll pull a card for a location. It's a King of Hearts. And the hearts is a bunch of little Kirby. Dense woods. Lizzie Rose says, I love snow. I don't want to be too emphatic about it because I do understand the amount of troubles it creates, but yeah, ultimately the dampened sound, it catches light in a really beautiful way, and I don't mind being cold. Uncle Kitty said the grocery store is across the street. Well, that is the dream. Here, Says they stock up so they don't have to leave their blanket burrito. Blanket burrito is a cute phrase. Godwin. I realize this is not compelling, but give me a second. Uncle Kitty said, "It's a Kroger's, sadly." A statement that means nothing to me, unfortunately. Straightened. Out his stiff fingers as much as his age permitted. Then pulled the woolen one owl looks weird to me too, but that's what I was thinking. Yura says that's almost worse than nothing. Okay, Americans, you're gonna have to explain Kroger's to the rest of us. What's the issue? A woolen mitt over his hand and picked up his leather sack. Jump Store likes eating ice. I had a friend who liked to do it too. I'm neither here nor there on it. I'm not one of those people that like freaks out about eating ice, but like they like weirds them out. But I didn't get much from it. I am the kind of person though that if you give me something where like a sucker or a popsicle or something like that, where you're supposed to just sort of, you know, slowly suck on it. I'm the kind of person who just ends up eating it. Like I just bite into it. GS says Canadian has 2 L's. Oh, is that another Canadian 2L thing? Well, then. Screw you, Google. Uncle Kitty says, do you have a bland supermarket chain with sparse selection and poor service in Canada? I mean, I don't really think of supermarket chains as having service at all. Barely ever see anybody there. Nothing really comes to mind. Any Canadians in chat think of anything that might be comparable? Maybe Safeway is meh. It's sort of like angled a bit more towards pre-prepared foods, would be my complaint. You checked one last time to ensure the ornate axe and woven doll. We're still in amongst. His rations and sleeping roll. Here it says, I knew I'd like Canada, even the grocery stores are isolating. It's definitely a place. So, like, Canadians get a reputation for being friendly. I don't really think that's true. I think Canadians are polite. And helpful. Like, if you look lost, we're the kind of people who walk up and ask if you need directions or something like that. But, like, we're also kind of cold and don't really, especially in Vancouver, like, we don't really get together and do stuff much. Like, I don't know if that's just that northerner influence. Because, you know, a lot of the people that came over like me are like Arcadian, Norse and kind of cultures. A lot of like lumberjacks, which is where generally we're pulled out of those kind of places, came to Canada. And I think maybe that kind of persists. I mean, the name for Vancouver, locally and beyond, is No Fun City. And the reason why we earned that name is if you go to like concerts and stuff, the crowds are like dead. They barely respond compared to other places. Like, it's not like LA or something where it's a, you know, raucous every concert. In my experience, anyways. Jump Store says, I did hear that you could fit the entire population of Canada inside of California and still have room. Oh yeah, easily. I think California might even have more people than us. Lizzie Rose says, okay, but would Canada be a good backup country if you need to leave America? That's debatable. I guess it depends on what your priorities are. It's a pretty hard country to immigrate to, though. Especially now, we kind of closed our borders a bit pretty recently. I think people think it's going to be easier to get here than it is. It's definitely easier if you are like marrying someone here. That definitely helps. But beyond that, yeah, not so much. So yeah, some people, I wouldn't say it's not a nice place or anything. I just think to some extent we get, like, when I think of friendly, I've had way more friendly interactions with people from the South or something, right? Like, friendly being like gregarious, invite you, a stranger, into the house and give them some food or something like a Canadian would never do anything like that. Uncle Kitty says, Canadian immigration is tough unless you got money. It definitely helps to have money because it costs a lot to immigrate. Like, even to just be in the consideration is over $1,000. Which is a bit weird because we do have kind of a labor gap. You think we'd want more people here? But whatever. Does anyone know if there's a formal name for the little, like, in Norse culture, it's like a hollow brass or gold or silver or something to that effect, iron often, kind of bead that you would pull a beard through to keep it from going too wild. Uncle Kitty says the American exposure to Canada is either red-green. Oh, did red-green make it south? Well, that's cool, because red-green's great. The Trailer Park Boys, in acquired taste, but one I did acquire. I didn't like them at first, and then at one point I had to sit down and watch one of the whole seasons on DVD because my car broke down. Watching the whole arc of a season, I realized I kind of misjudged what the series was. And Letterkenny. Letterkenny was a little after me. I've seen probably 2 seasons of it or something. Lizzie Rose says hair beads. Yeah, I thought there might be a fun name for it, though. That's okay. Drop the pack. By the fire smoldering in the center of his hut, where the ground was driest. Then combed out the frost from his long gray beard. Uncle Kitty says, red green used to be quite popular here, still is in some places. I guess I can see that. I do feel like he is very definitively Canadian, but like it is more about a very particular type of blue collar experience more than just being Canadian. They're really just called hair tube beads or hair beads. I'm so disappointed that they don't have some special fancy name. He pulled his beard through a pitted bronze bead to hold it back in the wind on the trail ahead. Hold it back to keep it tame in the wind. Uncle Kitty says beard ring? Beard ring sounds better, but the thing that I thought would maybe affect Red Green's popularity was Red Green was, for what he was and for the time he was in, relatively progressive. Like he had a lot of episodes where he made progressive points, and I just figured that might have been off-putting to certain American audiences that would have otherwise have found appeal in Red Green. Pro tip. Don't inhale your tea. Then set off out into the frozen forest where he had built his hut. Here says, is someone going to explain Red Green? I thought you guys were talking about color blindness. I don't know you very well, but just based on things you've said, I don't think it would probably be a thing up your alley, but you can certainly find it on YouTube. It's a single camera. I believe, kind of skit comedy show. The premise is they're just a bunch of sort of really average working class guys who have this lodge where they're just men who hang out together at a lodge. And they put on this show. It's a sort of self-aware that it's a TV show. And in the show, they give tips from the perspective of being a somewhat lazy, you know, Northern Canadian working class dude. So it's a lot of him like fixing things with a bunch of duct tape and putting together these projects that are really like low cost and unlikely to succeed very much. And I don't know, it's a skit comedy show of a very particular nature. You'll know right away if it's something you're interested in. I think it's probably at this point the comedy is probably pretty corny for a more modern audience, and on top of that, I just think it's really for people who had a very specific experience, very similar to Trailer Park Boys in that way, where like it's an obnoxious show if you've never been poor or known people who are poor in the way that they are. Uncle Kitty says the animal control guy was my yes. He was a really good character actor, honestly. Jumpstore says, oh, that's remind me. Rory asked me what tea was drinking. I didn't want to push the issue, but I was surprised you didn't answer. I'm drinking ginger tea because it's supposed to be warming. It's a good thing you don't need to stay warm. It is, because as people in the chat probably remember, but it seems like Jumpstore does, I'm allergic to ginger. Not terribly, but enough that I don't go out of my way to to put it in perspective, the catch line that Red Green would often end his shows with, I think he always ended his shows with, is if the woman don't find you handsome, they will at least find you handy. Like, that's the premise. That's the kind of jokes it makes. The canopy of the pine tree canopy. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things when I watched back some of the old Red Green stuff that stood out is like it does kind of belong to that sort of like boomer comedy kind of era, but he never really like, he doesn't paint his wife as like a nagging horrible person the way so much of boomer comedy does. Like, he just didn't fall into any of those traps, and I appreciate it. The pine tree canopy was thick in this area. Was why Godwin built his home there. But the winds were stirring enough that he caught sight of looming gray clouds out on the horizon. Snow was coming, and maybe more. It was a risk, of course, to make this trip. And a fool's errand, by the account of his friends. For it was solstice? Solstice, right? Not mixing them up, because I do have a habit of mixing the two up. Christmas is the solstice one, right? Hira says she means well, even if your sharp tongue makes you question it. Yeah, I think when you reach a certain age, you just know things and couldn't be bothered to explain all the decades of experience that took you to learn it. For a long time, I didn't take that kind of thing very seriously. And now that I am on the cusp of being kind of on the older side of things, like I'm at the young end of old and the old end of young, I am starting to see how there's some things that are very hard to explain, and you just want to be like, you just need to trust me. This is not going to work. Jumpstore says, yep. Thank you, Jumpstore. For it was solstice, and the 12 days of feasting had begun. With that, every good person of the North knew that one must be indoors by sundown, or risk being swept up into the wild hunt. The supernatural ride of mad devilry. Mad spirits. Devilry invites like a Christian comparison. That's not really what I'm going for. Equinox is spring and fall. Thank you. That's true, isn't it, Hira? Debauchery is a good word, yeah. Engaged in violent debauchery. Of an endless hunt carried on the northern wind. GS says verbs that suit what the vegetation is doing at the time. Does anyone know if that's why? I mean, it would make sense. Jump Story, did you make the ginger tea yourself? Is it just sliced ginger and hot water with some honey or something like that? Or is this something more complex? Justin Perry says, who's this Violet debauchery woman? Also, Justin Perry, I'm not sure if you've been in my chat before, but if you haven't, hello. Godwin was ignoring this wisdom. For the trip ahead would take him over valley, through valley, through valley and over. Not everything needs to be a $20 word, right? For at least a few days. Jumpstore says, nah, my store was probably, or was out of ginger, probably because it's so close to Thanksgiving. Is ginger associated with Thanksgiving? So tonight's tea was brought to you by Yogi. I think Violet Debauchery is a good name for, like, I don't know, a drag queen or something. Like, it's a good, like, character name. Godwin. This meant he would be out in the broad, frozen moors and fields during the evenings when the wild hunt was known to ride. Jumpstore says people use ginger in desserts like cookies and pies. I guess they do, don't they? I guess I just assumed people didn't use fresh ginger, but yeah, like gingerbread's a thing. All right, we've set our stakes. Let's pull some more cards and see if our weather changes. Card 1, a 3 of diamonds. Oops. So this will be our weather card. Move up on temperature and down on precipitation. Okay. So we went from chilly then, but we're back up to average. And then fog mist clears mid-morning if red card. Well, it's a red card. Fog and mist clears. It's a 3, so it's light breezes. And then we'll pull one more card for location. Justin Perry says, yeah, Violet Debauchery definitely sounds like a stage name. Maybe a wrestler. I agree. Or like a D&D character, if that's your scene. An Ace of Spades, right? Ace of Spades. Making references that probably no one's getting. Ace of Spades. All right. Ruins. Ruins. Ruins are a building. Is the building inhabited? If not, why was it abandoned? That's a good question. Ooh, let me think about that. Okay, let me get my notes down. The temperature it warms a bit. Yeah. I was thinking of Lemmy. Justin Perry got that. I mean, I guess my audience doesn't skew super young according to Google statistics, so maybe most of you know Lemmy. Okay. Ace of Spades was slightly warmer. No, it was the Three of Diamonds. Oh, that's so sweet. Jumpstore says the family that owns the store I work at are Japanese, and every year at Christmas the wife makes homemade goodie boxes for all the employees. That's so lovely. So it was diamonds. The fog mist clears, and it was light breezes. Okay. Uncle Kitty says, I miss Motorhead. The thing that stands out for me about Motorhead is just nothing else ever quite sounded the same. Like, I don't know that it was my favorite thing of all time, but there's been lots of people who've tried. Like, I do think in many ways, what's his name? Dragula. I forget his name. Rob Zombie. In many ways, I feel like Rob Zombie was trying to be that, but nothing ever quite sounded the same. It had such a distinct sound. Jumpstore says, Google told me I definitely had cancer when I asked why my lower back was sore. Is that like the AI generated answer? Because I don't understand who goes to that first. Uncle Kitty says Rob Zombie is closer to Primus musically. I wonder if I agree with that. Primus is pretty prog rock to me. Rob Zombie was more driving, but maybe you have a point. I don't know that I've ever like listened to a Rob Zombie album. I know songs from. That's a good point, GS. GS says Ace of Spades reference Motorhead sounded like a driving motor. They really did. Yeah, there was a kind of purity to it. Wasn't super complex, but if that's what you wanted, it was there. Justin Berry says, I love that we have the Wild Hunt in this. Me too. Wild Hunt is probably my favorite folklore cycle. Whether we'll get to the end of it is, I don't know. We'll see how far I get. Uncle Kitty says they're both considered to have songs in the funk metal genre. Really? Rob Zombie did funk? I knew him as like that in his like new metal era. When he was sort of akin to Korn or whatever. Cats do sleep in the weirdest ways. I don't understand how they get so comfortable. Fog clears. And west wind. I'm definitely gonna have to check it out, Uncle Kitty. Because like I said, I have never heard a song like that from him, but I guess it's possible. I mean, I feel like there was a bunch of like diversity in the early 90s kind of like weird metal scene that all turned into a very similar sound for about 4 years there, and then they split back off. Like, you know, if you listen to whatever the hell it used to be called, Manson's first album there, the Something Kids, and it was like sort of a strange, more like art project and musical thing. And then by the time you get to like Antichrist Superstar and a couple of the other ones, you start get that more driving produced sound that all the new metal had at that point. And then after about 2001, they all start going in different directions again. Justin Berry says, whether we'll get to the end of this, I don't know, is pretty much the basis of most ancient winter celebrations. You are correct. Warms a bit. Light breeze, fog clears, west wind. I should say, in case anyone's holding their breath, like I said, my favorite iteration of the Wild Hunt is Frau Gauden's Wild Hunt from northern Germany. If you don't know that, my other show on this channel, Fireside Fairy Tales, 2 years ago now, which is disturbing to think about, I read a bunch of iterations of the Wild Hunt, and there was about 3 or 4 tales of Frau Gauden in there, and her daughter hounds. I encourage you to check that one out. I just made a community post linking it, so it's easy enough to find. Witchery, good to see you, Witchery. I hope something in your life is going well. I know that you've had a bit of a rough time. Oh, what are the ruins? You know, from this era, it could be an old castle, but it could be like a burned longhouse, maybe something that was raided. Or we could go weird. It could be like an abandoned area, and he doesn't know what happened to them. He used to know who lived there, and they just disappeared one day. Uncle Kitty says funk mandel bands include Red Hot Chili Peppers. Oh, I always just thought of them as like a funk rock band. In Living Color, Infectious Grooves, Faith No More. I mean, Faith No More is everything. Like, there's no one genre I could assign that to. Jumpstore says, I'd argue that if they loved hunting so much, of being forced to hunt for eternity was a punishment. Well, that's kind of the premise of Frau Gauden, right? She says she would rather hunt than go to heaven, and so she's damned. And we're supposed to be like, oh, that's a mistake. Heaven would have been better, but I don't know. She seems to be having a good time. Uncle Kitty says it's the bass. I was a bassist, by the way. I don't know that I was any good at it, but that was an instrument I had a particular affection for. Yeah. Godwin jammed his numb and crooked hand into the granite to a granite shelf. Below a leaning pine tree, laden with dusty snow. Faith No More is such a strange band, and what's his name? Who's the lead of it? Shame on me for forgetting his name, but I forget everyone's name. We're just like a crazy talented person, but like only a select generation of weirdos seem to know him. He even exists. He's got like one of the best vocal ranges in human history. I don't think anybody even knows him. I liked he did a band in the mid 2000s that was like native metal, I guess is what it would be. I don't know how he framed it, but it was sort of using indigenous ideas for music, infusing them with metal. So it was this really kind of driving, thumping kind of quality to it. I enjoyed the album that came out of that. His other band, Mr. Bungle, was weirder. Oh, he's got like 6. Well, that's a good point, GS. Yeah, everything about that whole scene is hard to describe. He's a weird guy. He's one of those guys who will like commit. Even if it's clearly not really working, he'll at least try. Yeah, Faith No More is definitely sort of a Faith No More is kind of old for me too. Like, it's a bit weird for me to know it. People my age don't even really seem to know it, but Godwin jammed his numb and crooked hand into a granite shelf below a leaning pine, laden with dusty snow. This last barrier at the edge of the thick woods was barely worth a mention when Godwin was a young man. However, there in the bitter cold, weighed down with gifts, the wall that was not more than twice his height felt proved a formidable opponent. Oh, is Mr. Bungle pre Faith No More? I have that all wrong then. 1985. Oh, that's okay, Uncle Kitty. I thought Mr. Bungle was after Faith No More too. Trying to track that guy's history is nuts. Mike Patton, right? That's his name. Boy, that took me a minute. Well, GS says it was formed after. Is Faith No More ended by 1985? I thought they were still running into the 90s. Go figure. Don't trust my memory for anything. 1979? Oh my god, they started when AC/DC started? Well, roughly. Well, when AC/DC kind of caught their stride. Oh my god. I guess they really were in the pocket for that punk movement then. Wow. That's nuts. I didn't know they were that old. He slipped at least twice. Tearing his bag. Uncle Kitty said they get back together ever so often. So like every Mike Patton project, it never really ends. But it's never consistent. I don't know what Patton is doing anymore. I mean, if he was running that band in like 83, man must not be young. I thought he was younger than that. It was impressive that the blade was still so sharp. Godwin had done nothing to care for it. Never oiled and never run its edge against a honing stone. Yet the old axe never dulled, never took the pitting of rust. Uncle Kitty says he was born in 68. Is that Gen X then, I guess? Or is that still Boomer? What's the cutoff for Boomers? Because I always took him to be like Gen X. Iconically Gen X. Uncle Kitty said, holy crap, he's only 3 years older than me. Oh, wow. I think the worst thing is when I like look at someone, I'm like, oh, wow, that guy's really successful. And then I find out he's like 4 years younger than me. What have I been doing? It was a lot easier when I was like in my early 20s and be like, well, what they all do cool things too. Uncle Kitty says, I'm Gen X. Indeed. You're born in the 70s, yeah, for sure. Which means you are required to do some things, which is to hate hippies and to tell me about being a latchkey kid. I'm one of those, I'm a millennial, obviously. I think that's very clear, but I'm on the older side of millennial, so I was sort of friends with a lot of Gen X people, sort of late Gen X. I'm on that boundary. Uncle Kitty says, I was a latchkey kid and I'm neutral on hippies. No, you don't understand. You're not allowed to have your own opinions. It's decided by your generation. Jumpstore says, isn't Gen X from the 60s to 80s and then 80s to 2000s for millennial? Like, roughly. I think it's 80s to 96 for millennials. After that is Gen Z. And then Gen Alpha after 2012. And then Gen X, I don't know for sure where it starts. But yeah, it definitely ends in the 80s. And for those who are like, generations don't matter, that's half true, but it's not fully true. There is a reason why. Certain iconic things that define those generations. Like, for example, millennials, what that really means is we're digital natives. And what that means is we never knew a time where there wasn't a digital world. We didn't, even if we weren't really super involved with computers. Like, I think I only got a computer in like 97, which was, you know, a good amount of years into my life. But there was always like something digital around, and that sort of changes a perspective, makes us easier for us to pick up on it and whatever else. But I actually don't know where boomers end and Gen X begins. I just know they despise each other. Traditionally. It was dwarven craft. And a spectacular piece at that. Better than anything Godwin could have paid for in his life. Oh God, colored ketchup. Oh, you're taking me back, Jumpstore. Nobody asked for it, but they gave it to us. Godwin spent a few moments stitching the terror shut. The strip, fold, leather, peeled off his belt. Then, deciding when he stood and faced the wall, the edge, the small cliff, again, he decided to finally test the theory. The dwarven craft. Tools. Cleave stone. Gia says latchkey means an independent survivor. Indeed. Uncle Kitty says banana ketchup tastes a lot like tomato. I've never had banana ketchup. Uncle Kitty says mushroom ketchup does not. Yeah, because I think one is trying to be modern ketchup, and the other one, mushroom ketchup, is older than tomato ketchup. Back when ketchup was just kind of a sauce name. Do you think all my talk about Faith No More has scared off any younger crowd? Like, should I be saying like things like Skibbity Toilet and Chuggy and I don't know whatever else? Pretend I'm a kid. Hey kids, we're gonna play a Fortnite. Is that even a thing anymore? Like, I guess it is. I mean, I guess it is. Like, it's playable, but I don't know that it's as iconic as it was. What feels like 3 years ago, but was probably 10 years ago. Some things are pretty evergreen, though. It seems like Minecraft's still going. Or Minecraft with the horrors of capitalism grafted on it, which we call Roblox. He decided to finally test the theory that dwarven craft tools could cleave stone, and buried the axe into the cliff. Jumpstore says Rory's hello fellow kids transformation is almost complete. I'm sure if I use their slang, I could really get the kids in here to watch a man older than them right. This is definitely what the youth are looking for. And the generation I'm referencing, I'm old enough to be their dad. The broad axe slid right through the marbled granite, as if it were a stump of buggy wood. Godwin's eyes widened, and he nodded, saying to himself, "Oh, maybe I am making a mistake. This is the finest axe ever I have seen." Yeah, I think I was that way in the other direction, Uncle Kitty. Like in high school, I was listening to like 1960s weird pop music, like 50s, 60s. When I say weird pop, I don't mean like doo-wop or something like that. What I mean is like lounge music and stuff like that. And the Rat Pack and all that. Not that I didn't also like modern music. Oh, I just let them have their fun, Jumpstore. Everyone gets old. They'll know what's coming sooner or later. I know there was a thing there for a little while where it was like millennials. I don't remember what it was. It was like some millennial cultural mainstay was being questioned by Gen Z, and a bunch of people on Instagram were like trying to tell them off. And I don't know. It's like, you guys are like almost 40 years old, and what, are you having an argument with like a 14-year-old? Grow up. Come on, let it go. You're old. Just accept it. You're old. It proved a mite harder to free from the stone. Closer to an hour of heaving. But the wound in the rock face gave better purchase to his foot. And so he lurched over the top. Broke trail out of the tree line. Oh, well, I mean, that's different, Jumpstore. People are like threatening you for sure. Yeah, I'm not talking about like in-person encounters on the street, like somebody giving you a hassling you or whatever else. Uncle Kitty says, my current obsession is Amelie Farron. Don't know her. Assuming that's a her. But the one that I just found the other day, which I might have been the last person who's into like guitar stuff to find out. I don't know how I missed them. It was Derek Trucks. As a person who like played a lot of guitar, bass and six string, not well enough that I'm ever going to play it for anybody else. It was just for me. But played a lot of guitar, has like old blues records, you know, went and saw Satriani and Steve Vai and stuff in concert. Like a person who was a nerd about guitar stuff, especially in the 2000s and early 2010s. I don't know how I missed Derek Trucks, but my God, what a beautiful guitar player. Dumbstore says they're not even nice headphones. They were $20 on Amazon. Are they earbuds or are they like headphones like mine? The trail wove down into a broad and frozen valley. That covered as it was in snow. GS says folksy. She sounds Celtic almost. Oh, interesting. I'm a person who unironically likes a certain amount of Enya songs. And I don't know if... I mean, I know that's not a cool thing, but I do like Celtic sounds. Jumpstore says, I think I know the difference between headphones and earbuds by now. I don't know. Maybe you use them interchangeably. Lots of people do. So that's not earbuds then. $20 headphones. Headphones like these. And they sound okay? Uncle Kitty says, I do like Enya. Yeah, I don't need like albums of Enya, but like I think she got a reputation in the late 90s for being very sort of associated to a particular type of person, but I think that's was a bit unfair. I don't really think that's what she was up to. Oh, and Tori Amos. Tori Amos is a name I haven't heard in a long time. Jumpstore, I haven't gotten around to reading anything. I haven't read anything since October. Been very busy. Uncle Kitty says, unusual since I grew up on metal. But metal is just like an angry version of a lot of different types of music. Like there's structurally, metal can be anything from jazz to blues to classical and beyond. So it just depends. Like at some point, if you want to turn the distortion down and slow the tempo, that's what a lot of that music is. One could easily mistake for a frozen lake. It was in the warm months. A field of wildflowers. Kitty says a lot of metal music sounds like surf music when you turn off the distortion. Indeed. Because a lot of metal does the same thing as surf, where it's like, it's not so much the melody as the tempo and the rhythm is what gives it its flavor and its texture. My bread and butter in high school, though, was Queens of the Stone Age. That was kind of the band that informed a lot of my modern music opinions anyways. Jumpstore says they're decent for what they are. They aren't noise canceling, but they work fine, last me a while. I don't like earbuds. I don't like earbuds either. I can't wear them. These headphones are quite expensive. They've lasted pretty well. But one of the main things I wanted from them was noise canceling. I'm sensitive to sound. A place so inviting. That nomadic folks decide to try to settle there each spring. But when the winds begin to blow and the chill sets in, the valley becomes still of life, a place without water or food. Those that do stay through the starvation and risk the winter simply disappear. By the spring. Godwin would often tread there in late summer to warn away the recent settlers. But no one listened to the old man. Messer Chups is a surf band you might like, Rory. I might. I do like surf. GS says Vestal Valley. What does Vestal mean? he didn't bother this year or last. And when he came came out of the forest, so it was a surprise to him to see a longhouse surrounded by a rough collection of huts and homes. Chased untouched. Oh, okay. He had to check, though he knew from the smokeless chimneys that the same ill fate that the story was all too familiar. For their song Magneto. Is that a reference to the X-Man thing, or are they actually using the Latin word? Or? The windows were frosted. Would they have windows? They wouldn't have windows. The doors that still hung from the frames, right, banged and swung in the wind. They fall on the spooky side of Surf Rock. Didn't know there was a spooky side to Surf Rock. Most were shattered, as was often the case in the ruins that thawed in spring. The only sign of struggle in this abandoned town was a great cleaving scar, great cleaving blow. That ran roof to ground to floor, bisecting the longhouse. Kira says, did you guys hear that the author of the Witcher series is making a new Witcher book that's going to focus on Geralt as a teenager? So like when he's training with the witches and stuff? I didn't know that. Cool. Janera says, hello, are we Santa? We are not. Also, hello, Janera. Good to see you. Godwin didn't know what it was. But he knew it was some beast and assumed it must have been the hungry trolls that haunted the glass peaks to the north. A raider would have taken the gold and iron, left the bodies. Yet the iron and gold remained, and there was nary a bone to be found in the small town. Hira says we're axe borers without permission. Yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of let time get away from me. I don't think we're gonna. I wanted to get more into the wild hunt and stuff, but I suppose I can make a little reference to it here. It wouldn't be an end, but this is an interesting start for a story I wanted to write anyways. The town's carcass, nevertheless, made for good cover. Risky as it was, he did not expect that trolls would venture down for just one man. The day was dimming, for daylight was scarce in these winter months. In the vanguard of thundering clouds were riding between the peaks of the horizon. Portending of the mad howls. That would surely follow. With the pursuing. Godwin made a low fire. In one of the better preserved huts. And secured the battered door. With a seating stone. The night brought thunder and rage to the skies beyond. He was thankful to have found this abandoned place. For surely the wild hunt would have swept him up. Had he not. Jumpstore says, I saw this comic of a cat with a cell phone saying, I'm taking a picture of this empty food bowl and sending it to animal welfare. Godwin slept with one hand on the axe. He dreamt of the cries and screams dreamt of the pleading words to leave the old blade. He dreamt of smoke and blood. He dreamt of a bitter man, younger than him, carved by violent times. He dreamt of regret. Then the morning came. And he stuffed it away into his pack so he could carry on. Uncle Kitty out here making good music recommendations. Right, Uncle Kitty. Well, now you have to make recommendations every day. Did you ever have a blog, Uncle Kitty? I know you said you used to write reviews and stuff of horror films and stuff. Was that in a blog setting or newspaper? Because it seems like you could probably pull off a blog. People seem to like your recommendations. So my cat is not a particularly food-driven cat for much of his life, but I think it's because he had stomach problems. I think they've improved because he's become a bit more demanding. I also just think cats are like just more self-confident. Dogs are like insecure. They're like, oh, I don't know. Maybe you won't like me if I don't ask for it. I don't want to upset you. Cats are like, listen, loser. We both know you're in your underwear on the couch and you're not doing anything of value. Get up and feed me. Like, that's very much their vibe. I like punk, Uncle Kitty. I think probably if I was going to identify most with anything, especially in my youth, but even it was like in my youth, and then it was less so, and then the last few years even more so, because I have a punk soul. I do tend towards more melodic stuff like Bad Brains or whatever, but yeah. Okay. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you just want to know what we came up with. And what we did was we played a game called Threep and Amble Through the Borderlands. We themed it around Christmas, and we put a little bit of a story around there. Not so much Christmas, but midwinter solstice stuff. The way the game works is basically you draw cards. One card gives you the weather, and the other one gives you sort of some landmark or something you come across, something interesting. And we use that as a sort of structure. It also, we used, I should say, they have some extra prompts here. We used it to come up with names. There's even other things you could do for like personality traits or physical features or whatever in this. It's a very good little document. If you want to try it yourself, I will have it in a pinned comment below when the video is no longer live. It does cost a bit of money, but I think also they have community copies. If you can afford it, though, you should pay the creator. They've come up with a good, fun little thing if you like writing about this sort of stuff. But anyways, we basically use that to come up with the name Godwin Forrester. But it's pretty much set in like a sort of medieval era Norse kind of place. So the name doesn't really match up at all with the cultural references we're making, but whatever. And anyways, it's a story about a man who needs to carry a gift to somewhere. We didn't make it through to the end, but we made it through to sort of I would say a break in the story. Godwin straightened out his stiff fingers as much as his age permitted, then pulled a woolen mitt over his hand and picked up his leather sack. He checked it one last time to ensure that the ornate axe and woven doll were still in amongst his rations and sleeping roll. He then dropped the pack by the fire that smoldered in the center of his hut. Where the ground was driest, and combed out the frost from his long gray beard. He then pulled his beard through a pitted bronze bead to keep it tamed while the wind blew on the trail ahead, then set off into the frozen forest around his hut. The pine-tree canopy was thick in this area. It was much the reason why Godwin built his home there. But the winds were stirring enough that he caught sights of looming gray clouds out on the horizon as the trees bent out of the way. Snow was coming, maybe more. It was a risk, of course, to make this kind of trip at this time of year, and a fool's errand by the account of his friends. For it was solstice, and the 12 days of feasting had begun. With that, every good person of the north knew that one must be indoors by sundown, or they would risk being swept up into the wild hunt, the supernatural ride of mad spirits engaged in the violent debauchery of an endless hunt carried on the northern wind. Godwin was ignoring this wisdom, though, for the trip ahead would take him through valleys and over cliffs for at least a few days, out exposed. This meant he would be out in the broad frozen moors and fields during the evenings when the wild hunt was known to ride. Godwin jammed his numb and crooked hand into a granite shelf below a leaning pine laden with dusty snow. This was the last barrier, the edge of the thick woods where he lived. It was once barely worth a mention, so minor a task it was for Godwin as a young man to climb it. However, there in the bitter cold and weighed down by gifts in his pack, this wall was not more than twice his height. This wall that was not more than twice his height proved a formidable opponent. He slipped off it at least once, tearing his bag against the blade of the axe when he slammed down on the ground below. It was impressive that the blade was still so sharp enough to tear through leather. Godwin had never done anything to care for it. He never oiled it, never ran its edge against a honing stone. Yet the old axe never dulled, never pitted to rust, and never tarnished. It was, after all, dwarven craft, and a spectacular piece at that. Better than anything Godwin could have paid for in his life. Godwin spent a few moments stitching the tear shut with a strip of old leather peeled off from his belt. When he stood to face the small cliff again, he decided to finally test the theory that dwarven craft tools could cleave stone and buried the axe into the cliff. The broad edge of it slid right through the marbled granite as if it were a stump of buggy wood. Godwin's eyes widened and he nodded, saying to himself, "Oh, maybe I am making a mistake. This is the finest axe ever I have seen." It proved a mite harder to free from the stone, though, closer to an hour of heaving, but the wound in the rock face still gave better purchase to his foot, allowing him to lurch over the top and break trail out of the tree line. The trail wove down into a broad and frozen valley that, covered as it was in snow, one could easily mistake for a frozen lake. It was, in fact, though, at least in the warm months, a field of wildflowers, a place so inviting that nomadic folks decided to try to settle there each spring. But when the winds began to blow and the chill sets in, the Vestal Valley becomes still of life, a place without water or food. Those that do stay through the starvation and risk the winter simply disappeared by spring. Godwin would often tread there in late summer to warn away any recent settlers, but no one ever listened to the old man. He didn't bother this year or last to do so, so it was a bit of a surprise to him to see. I guess it'd be no surprise to him. It was no surprise to him to see a longhouse surrounded by a rough collection of huts and homes. He had to check them, though he knew from the smokeless chimneys that the story was the same as always. The doors that still hung from the frame banged and swung in the wind. Most, though, were shattered, as was often the case in Vestal Valley, ruins that thawed out in the spring. The only sign of a struggle in this abandoned town was the scar of a great cleaving blow from roof to floor, bisecting the longhouse. Godwin didn't know what it was, but he knew it was some beast that did these things, and assumed it must have been the hungry trolls that haunted the glass peaks to the north. A raider would have taken the gold and iron, but left the bodies, and yet the iron and gold remained, and there was nary a bone to be found in the small town. The town's carcass nevertheless made for good cover in the evening. Risky as it was, he did not expect the trolls would venture down for just one man. And the day was dimming, for daylight was scarce in these winter months, and the vanguard of thundering clouds were riding in between the peaks of the horizon, portending of the mad howls that would surely follow from the pursuing wild hunt. Godwin made a low fire in one of the better preserved huts, and secured the battered door with a seating stone. The night then brought thunder and rage to the skies beyond his roof. That's what I meant to say. He was thankful to have found this abandoned place, for surely the wild hunt would have swept him up had he not. Godwin then slept with one hand on the axe. As he did, he dreamt of the pleading words to leave the old blade behind. He dreamt of smoke and blood. He dreamt of a bitter man, younger than him but carved by violent times. He dreamt of regret. Then the morning came and he stuffed it away into his pack so he could carry on. And Jumpstore says, when I first heard Evanescence, it got me more into contemporary music. Evanescence wasn't like a me band, but I understand that experience because that's kind of where I was at until I found Queens of the Stone Age. I guess the first modern band I really liked was, I'm talking I was 12, 13 kind of age, was Sum 41. And then I as I sort of got on in high school, I don't know, there just wasn't any modern music I liked. Listened to old records and stuff like that. But then I found Queens of the Stone Age in my later high school years and really enjoyed it. Lizzie Rose says, I want to hear more about this guy and this axe. Yeah, I actually have every intention of writing this story out. I don't know if you were here in the beginning. You might have been lurking, but part of the reason I wanted to do this, because it obviously is very similar thematically as a game to the thing I did last week. But I wanted to write a Christmas story. I don't know really what for, but I just did. Not a Christmas story. A story around the time that we would call Christmas. The risky thing with doing anything historically informed like this is I'm not a historian. And do I really want to do, 10 books worth of research for a short story? I don't know. Maybe nobody cares. Obviously, I'm leaning more to the folklore side of it. I'll tell you what, Lizzie Rose. Before Christmas, maybe we'll come back and try to write more of this. Oh. All right. I've been a bit sleepy today. I don't really have any reason for it. I think I just didn't sleep very well. There's nothing really going wrong in my life or anything any more than usual, really. Life is hard all the time, but so I'm sorry if I missed a comment or something or didn't keep track of chat. It's nothing personal. Just a little spacey today. Jumpstore says, I wish we could find a way to return to our eldritch horror attempting to fill in for Santa. Hell yeah, let's do that. Sure. I still have that game. I don't know what I would do with it, but I don't know. It's like Chuck Close says. You figure these things out as you do them. Yeah, Lizzie Rose says call it fantasy and it doesn't have to be historical. It has a joint purpose too. It's sort of like, allow me to be pretentious for a moment. I know how cool you all think I am. But at my core, I'm a pretentious little art kid. I am a writer. I do other art too, but just not very well. Allow me to be a pretentious art kid for a reason, for a moment. When an artist, like a visual artist, like a painter or something like that, wants to do a sort of big project, they'll do studies, right? And studies are like sketches. It could be life drawings. It could be little parts of it. It could be a study of flowers, whatever. They'll fill books with stuff. The equivalent of a study, for me at least, as a writer, if I want to do something longer, but it's a little bit, I'm not too sure what to do with it, is I do little short stories to see if I if I'm the person to even be writing this stuff, right? And I have this story I've sort of had in my mind for about a year now, and it starts in like Viking era, but I'm not sure if that's an era that I'm good at writing. So this was like one path into it, just a sort of pretty straightforward journey of a regretful man going across that sort of roughly that era, with a bit of magical qualities, a little bit of the holder in there. Yeah, that's so I'm happy to do more of it because it's kind of what I want to be doing right now anyways. However, yeah, I just realized Witchery dropped in and then dropped out. Hope Witchery's okay. However, I would love to return to the Eldritch Horse, and I don't know what I would do. I'm not sure what I would do, but we didn't make it that far with it. GS says Viking is a good choice because not a lot is known. True. We know bits and pieces, but not much. And like, as other people have pointed out, most of it gets written down much later. Everything we know about the Viking era, I don't know if many people know this. I think anybody who's ever actually looked at the history knows this, but anything we know about the Viking era, outside of artifact finds, but anything written, was written by Christians like 200 years later. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe they had their own biases, maybe they didn't. With the exception of, I forget his name, a fellow from the Middle East who went up there. Hira says my mom rambles when she's tired too. Indeed. I ramble. I ramble when I'm awake. I'm a rambler. All right. Well, that's what we did today. And as you may have noticed, I like Christmas. I like solstice. And hopefully we can, hopefully nothing else happens that stops me from doing streams, by the way. Sorry about Tuesday. I did actually manage to keep my power the whole time, but we did get some pretty heavy wind. We weren't even getting half of what was going on, just even like 20 miles out on the coast. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Most writing doesn't survive, period, right? All right. Nobody wants to hear this anymore. If you guys enjoyed it, hey, consider liking the stream. If you didn't, don't. To be honest, I don't get enough likes to affect my standing in any algorithm. It's just sort of like how you say that you enjoyed the stream. That sounds right, Kira. And there's not really a lot of reason to doubt. There might be a little bit of sensationalism and a little bit of not understanding what he was seeing, but there isn't a lot of reason to doubt that it was like made up whole cloth the way like a lot of Greek history was, ancient Athenian history, which was like borderline nonsense, made up mythos kind of stuff. But it seems a lot more grounded than that. Anyways, I enjoyed this. Sure, we can come back to it. I know. I mean, we're coming into December. I'll say this. Obviously, we're gonna have to go back to the floating bookshop, or I would have a mutiny on my hands. We started it at Christmas. Got to go back for Christmas. Yeah, GS says, but you appreciate the likes. That's what I was trying to say. It's like a little round of applause or something, like, hey, thanks. It doesn't actually, it's not me trying to like engagement farm. This isn't going to be a popular stream. That's fine. Yeah, I think so too as well. Seemed, at the very least, less biased. But yeah, we're going to have to go back to that. We'll go back and do Eldritch Horror Santa. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but we'll do that. And maybe we'll come back to this because this is very contained to Christmas. Although I could do this as a New Year's thing too, because the 12 days of feasting extends into our New Year's. And we'll do something else in there too. And also there will be Fireside Fairy Tales, which I gotta find stories that fit the season, which is the hardest season to fill, unfortunately, but I'll find something and we'll have fun reading it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me in the chat and joining me for the game. Again, if you want to try it yourself, it's on itch.io, and I'll have it pinned in the comment below when we're no longer live. And as for me, well, just like you, I don't have to go home.